Melbourne could kill your property portfolio growth if you don't understand these things.
If you do the wrong thing at the wrong time in Melbourne, it could definitely kill your portfolio.
This episode, we dive deep into the details for anyone interested in building a portfolio that wants to buy in Melbourne in 2025.
There's all these factors that does tend to make sense from a fundamental perspective. But there's a lot of caveats in Melbourne at the moment.
We're talking yields, land tax, and negative sentiment that all needs to be balanced to still increase your chances of profiting in Melbourne without killing your portfolio growth. As well as talking about the triggers for growth.
If your goal is to make real money in property, you need to
Together with Simon Loo, property investor with a mammoth portfolio and founder of Housefinder, we're going to unpack in this episode some of the key differences between buying a property and setting yourself up to build a portfolio.
It's a tightrope. You're here and your passive income goals is here. And you're walking along this tightrope to get to the other side.
As well as giving away an area that's primed right now for under-market deals. Where in Melbourne now are you finding the best under-market deals?
It's a bit of a trade secret.
What about one? Just one. If you've been wanting to get into the Melbourne property market, but still grow a portfolio, this is an episode you can't afford to miss. My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast. This episode is powered by Property Developer Network, Suburbs Finder, and House Finder. More about our amazing show sponsors in the show notes below. Right now, let's jump straight into this episode with Simon Loo. Melbourne could kill your portfolio. Mate, that's a massive statement.
It could, Todd.
Could?
But it depends.
Okay. Depends
on a lot of variables.
Right.
But if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time in Melbourne, it could definitely kill your portfolio.
Right. And this is why I wanted to make this episode with you, because I feel like there is so much hype around Melbourne at the moment. It feels like every second episode we're making right now, it's being requested to be Melbourne. I swear you guys are going to get sick of it soon, but you keep asking for it. I'm going to keep doing it. But it's about talking about the yield balance. You're going to be talking about taxes. You're going to be talking about artificial influences, uncontrollables, all of these different balances.
Yep.
But the purpose of this episode, if I've really understood you right with this, is it's not about anti-Melbourne. It's about getting to a certain point in Melbourne before it actually starts like cannibalizing your portfolio.
There's two sides to Melbourne in terms of why people want to buy there. The first side is the allure of Melbourne, the emotional allure of it, meaning that if you look at Australia, Sydney and Melbourne have always been the darling cities, right? It's the most renowned globally. It's considered the most prestigious, I guess, so to speak, at least for now anyway.
Whenever you go overseas, cab drivers are always like, you from Melbourne?
Yeah, are you Melburnian?
Yeah.
Oh, that was terrible. But anyway, but it's one of those things where I think a lot of people buy, similar to Sydney, they buy mostly with their heart rather than their head, right? Because it's also an ego thing, like a bragging thing. I own houses in Melbourne, I own property in Sydney, you know, to their friends and family. It's a bit of a status symbol. And then the second side is people who are reading the market now and going, you know what, it's been stagnant for so long. Demand is somewhat depressed. There's a lot of good deals on the ground, a lot of bargains, a lot of areas that are ripe for growth, for gentrification, population's growing. You know, there's all these factors that does tend to make sense from a fundamental or from a growth perspective. But there's a lot of caveats in Melbourne at the moment.
Let's start opening up a few of them. Or is there anything else that you really want to set the stage with?
The number one problem in Melbourne, as everyone knows, property related, is currently land tax. I think that's always the basis as to the questions I get about Melbourne. Is it going to help me long term? Is it going to grow? I get a lot of questions. Like, if anyone ever asks me whether an area is going to grow or not, my default answer is always, I don't know. Right? And no one knows. Yeah. If anyone knows, they're lying. They got all the data and stats and all that kind of rubbish. They can make an educated guess, but no one actually knows. Right. So the question is, I don't know. However, I do believe that Melbourne is pretty much at as much of a bottom as it can be. Right, as a city with the kind of status and the kind of allure that it has, right? Any cheaper, it would just get flooded by anyone looking to settle down or own occupiers and all that kind of stuff. That, from that perspective, I guess you can think, at least from my opinion, is that the only way is up. But the question is, how long is that up going to take? And what are some of the things that are stopping it?
And what's it going to cost you in the meantime when you're holding that? Because, I mean, you've put together a little bit of research here as well, like the difference between holding 2 properties with like land tax or land value of about 500K each versus if you would actually really build a portfolio and hold 5 properties. And like it's staggering. It's not just a bit more.
It's a lot more. And it's, look, I think I should preface this up by saying that the land tax is something that was put in place artificially. Right? It was just something that just came up almost overnight from when COVID happened. And as a result of that, a lot of people sold. A lot of people got out of the Melbourne market because it was no longer viable to hold, for a lot of people, even just one house there. You know, if you have one house in Melbourne under your own name, I think you're paying minimum $2,000 to $3,000 a year worth of land tax off the bat, right? And to compound on that problem, Melbourne has grown actually from around about 2011-ish up until COVID. So it's actually grown for quite a long period, almost in line with Sydney. But when COVID happened, obviously we all had the lockdowns. And famously, I think
Melbourne felt it the hardest.
Yeah, but, you know, I wouldn't even say it's arguable, but I think probably the way the state government handled the COVID lockdowns in Melbourne were particularly unforgiving. And relentless in terms of, you know, how it affected businesses and livelihoods and things like that. So there's, you know, that along with things like adding land taxes and there's a lot of sort of landlord policies as well that's been put in place. I wouldn't make it more difficult for landlords to hold properties, but definitely skews the equation a lot more towards the tenants. So all these things put together, a lot of people have lost faith and they've just left, right? So what does that mean? It means that for the past 4 or 5 years, it's been a very stagnant, even in some cases a declining market. But because it still has grown for about 9 or so years prior to COVID, the house prices are here and the rental demand or the rental prices are way down here. So even if you go all the way to the outskirts where traditionally in a big city, you've got massive rental yields or high rental yields, you're looking at 4.5% if you're lucky. Right, and these are areas like Melton and Broadmeadows and Werribee and so on, right? So imagine getting 4.5% rental yield. You're paying 6.5% interest rates, plus you got to pay $2,000-3,000 worth of land tax on top of the already very negative cash flow. So what that basically means is your holding cost is significant. Everything revolves around that in terms of my reservation for some people to buy and hold property in Melbourne at the moment.
Well, and to open up this comparison a little bit more that we've got here is if we had 2 properties, like I was saying, both with a land component of $500,000 each, which isn't unreasonable, that's $4,650 if it's held outside of a trust. So that's in your own name. If that was 5 properties, all with a land component, same deal, $500,000 each, which again, 5 properties, like not everyone has a 5 property portfolio, but if you're really trying to swing for the fence, that's not that uncommon. We've now jumped from $4,500 to $23,400. Essentially the rent of one of your houses is going to land tax every year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's and my concern is, when will this be fixed? When will it be reversed? When will it be...
Do you reckon it will be?
When will it be improved? I am very skeptical, because if you look at the history of how Australia as a whole has dealt with repealing taxes and reducing taxes, we don't have a good history of doing that. I don't think any country does, but notoriously in Australia, we're very good at adding taxes and increasing taxes, but taking them away is a very difficult thing to do. The tax has such a massive impact on even owning just one property. You're relying on the improvement of that property in terms of significant growth on the government making a change. I think it's an extra level of risk.
So why even enter Melbourne at all then?
Well, that's the catch-22, right? Like I said before, there are good deals, right? All the people, all the landlords, all the previous investors that have left a market where you can pick up really good bargains. You are buying into a market where prices are relatively depressed. You're buying into a market where it's experienced about 140 to 150,000 worth of population growth.
That's massive.
In 12 months, right? So clearly people are moving there en masse. This wasn't like that just a few years ago. A lot more people were moving out than were moving in, but now people are moving back in. So you've got that pressure of people needing houses, whether they're renting or whether they're buying. That's like, I guess, the pros, you know, and then the cons are land tax, anti-landlord policies, and holdability. What you were saying before, how it could kill your portfolio. I've always been a massive advocate that quantity is equally as important as quality. If your goal is to make real money in property, you need to buy a lot of them. Right. And this is on the assumption that you're not a multi-millionaire already earning millions of dollars a year and you're buying all these blue chip properties, multi-million dollar this and that. Right. We're talking like an average investor starting out on an average income, average situation, even above average. If you own one house, $500,000 and it goes to $1 million, you make 500 grand. You got 10 or 20 of them, you make way more than that. You know, 5 million, 10 million. So your goal is always to figure out how do you get a large volume of these properties in a relatively short amount of time so that you expose yourself to more growth. And what's crucial in that is always cash flow, right? Cash flow, number one, because you need to hold on to each of these houses long enough to see growth. So if Melbourne doubles in the next 5 years or 10 years, you just need to wait, right? If you've got a bunch of Melbourne properties. And if every house you own is hemorrhaging your back pocket,
you're not going to
thousands of dollars, number one, you're not going to own many, but the ones that you do own, at some point in time, you're going to be coerced into selling it or be forced to sell it. When I say forced, I mean things happen in life in 10 years, right? In the past 10 years, I've had times that were great, times that were not great. And if you have times that are not great and you've got a bunch of properties hemorrhaging your back pocket, you're going to have to let something go, right? Just out of pure necessity. That's holdability. The second thing is serviceability. As soon as you own a bunch of properties that's costing you hundreds and hundreds of dollars a week to hold on to, the banks are going to not want to lend you more money because obviously you're too risky. Purely from a borrowing perspective, you're not able to keep borrowing to buy as many properties as you possibly can.
Now, I know you're not a fan of granny flats. What do you think about rooming houses then, if we're talking about increasing cash flow?
I'm not a big fan of them. I think some of the reasons why I don't like granny flats compared to rooming houses are very similar. Number one, vacancies. You tend to get very transient tenants moving in and out. And it's not just about replacing a tenant. Right, if the vacancy rates are low, yes, the tenant comes out, new one goes in. But usually when there's people move out and move in, you have to do a little bit of maintenance. You have to, repaint this and fix up this and that was damaged during the normal wear and tear of
other costs
owning a
involved.
property.
Yep.
Rooming houses, if the house has a single bathroom or 2 bathrooms, and if a normal household would have 2 or 3 people using those bathrooms, so now you've got 10 people using those bathrooms, all the stuff inside is going to wear and tear several times faster. Kitchen, appliances, all that kind of stuff. So those are extra holding costs, not to mention the extra vacancy. And then, if you were to convert a normal house into like a rooming house situation, all the added costs of the renovations and all that kind of stuff is typically something you'd have to reverse if you were to sell the house. Because the emotional buyer, the young family that wants to pay a lot of money for these types of properties, which is, as an investor, is what you want to be exposed to. They're not going to want to buy a house with 10 rooms, and 2 bathrooms and all that kind of stuff, like that kind of setup. For the short-term gain of a little bit more cash flow, the costs involved and the risks involved doesn't really make much sense to me. If you're a brand new investor or a relatively new investor starting out, your goal is to chase a certain level of passive income. In say 5 or 10 or 15 years or whatever. And for that to happen, you need to buy multiple properties and you need to hold multiple properties to get there. You probably shouldn't be buying in Melbourne at the moment because quite frankly, you're going to max out at 1, 2, 3 properties from a holdability perspective and from a borrowing perspective. If you're the kind of investor that's done well in Sydney, got a few in Sydney, you've got a few in Brisbane, you've got a few in Perth in the past 4 or 5 years. That's done extremely well, and so have the rents. You're at a position where you've got a bit of equity, but also a bit of cash flow from those assets or from those properties. Then you should be buying 2, 3, however many you can to get yourself to that level where you're not over leveraging yourself as well.
Is this where it always comes back to talking to your broker to go, look, if I was to buy this house for 700 and it's renting for $500 a week, this one for 600, it's renting for 450, like they've got bad yields. However, I feel they've got super good growth potential, but what am I going to look like then after these purchases? Yeah. And if they're giving you like, okay, cool, you can do that and keep going, thumbs up. But if it's like, no, if you purchase that, that's it. You're taking a knee for a long time.
Go with what the broker says. I have said before as well, your broker should be the main person you consult with what type of property you buy next, and also at what price point. I know that sounds a bit strange, especially if coming from a buyer's agent. If your goal is to build your portfolio, one of the biggest considerations you need to think about when you buy the next property is if it allows you to buy the one after that. Forget about the performance, forget about the cash flow of that particular property and whether it's this or that, and big house, small house, it doesn't matter. If you absolutely tick every single box that you want in that next house, but it'll stuff up you buying your next house, it's not going to be worth it. You might feel great sleeping at night with a beautiful house in Melbourne, but at the end of the day, are you going to make more money out of that rather than maybe buying 3 or 4 other properties in another city that's also rising? This is another misconception that a lot of people tend to have. They think Melbourne is the only place that's going to be going up in the short term or the long term even, right? But they don't realize that all these other cities also still have that kind of potential.
So if we're talking about balancing the yield, someone that's going, yeah, okay, well, I've got 2 properties or 3 properties behind me now. I reckon I can actually afford to take a little bit of a hit because I want that exposure for the potential growth aspect of Melbourne.
Yeah.
But I'm wanting to balance it with something else that's higher. The yield compression seems to be everywhere now. Where else are people looking to try and find this balance?
Well, I mean, a lot of people have been anti-Perth for the past 12 months. It's one of those cities that has been very polarizing for even during the whole growth period, with the whole sort of assumption that it's mining related. But the truth of the matter is, in the past 12 months, Perth has also grown anywhere between 6 to 18%, depending on what statistic you look at and all that kind of stuff. So, but from a yield perspective, some of the stuff we bought 12 months ago in Perth, started off at, let's say, 5%, 5.5%. But one rental increase brings it up to 6 to 7% even in some cases, because the rental demand and the vacancy rates in Perth are extremely strong still at the moment. I think it is a bit of a balance. If you want to have a few in Melbourne, maybe you can buy a few in, say, Perth as well. Maybe wait for the rents to grow a little bit and then pick up a few in Melbourne, or vice versa. I think that probably makes more sense than holding all your properties in Melbourne if you won't be able to anyway. If you're earning, let's say, an average income,
capping out pretty quick.
You're gonna hit that ceiling really, really quickly. And not only that, coming back to the whole what's going to cause Melbourne to boom, you're kind of like a sitting duck with this assets that's hemorrhaging money from you, and you're sitting there every day praying that the new government's going to come in. Everyone's talking about the new election, and new government's going to come in. They're going to get rid of all the land tax, and going to be rosy days all over again. I'm very skeptical because the land tax has already pissed off so many people. So many people, locals, have made decisions based on that. They've sold off their investments. They've made big life changes. They've moved away to different cities or whatever it is, right? So if they change it back or make it less painful, a lot of people aren't going to be happy. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I think it's going to be a difficult thing for this land tax thing to be improved or fixed or removed completely. So it's a massive risk. A lot of people assume that Melbourne, being Melbourne, the big shiny city that it is it's only going to go up. And I actually do believe it, but how long is it going to take?
What's the trigger? What are you looking for then? So let's say they're listening, they're going, okay, maybe I'll plant 1 seed in Melbourne, maybe I'll plant 1 seed over in Perth or somewhere I can get a better yield, sort of split this a little bit. What are they waiting for to actually go, okay, now's the time in Melbourne?
You should never chase the bottom, and you should never chase the top either, because you can never get it. And I've always said as well, diversifying for the sake of diversifying is a very bad strategy in property, because in property, markets don't go up the same. In recent times, Sydney went first, and then Brisbane went, and then Perth went, and now we're looking at the cusp of maybe Adelaide/Melbourne. So right now, if I were to start out right now, a lot of people aren't going to like me for saying this, but I would probably put quite a bit of money back into Perth, right?
Still, and I know it's grown so much, and I know
it's grown so much. And by the way, I want to make it very clear: we are buying in Melbourne and Adelaide and all this kind of stuff. So it's not just because I have a love affair with Perth and that we're pigeonholed into that particular market. But the reason why we want to buy in Perth is because all the numbers, all the fundamentals still stack up. I've talked about this. I don't want to keep going on about it. Still affordable to the point where it's a scarcity. Right? All the stuff that you can still buy in Perth for 3-4 bedroom houses for 600, 700 near beaches. You can't do that anywhere else, right? Population growth, still tons of people moving there locally, as in interstate and also from overseas, right? So the demand's there and the yield still makes sense. 3-4 bedroom houses again in these areas that they're not even like Meltons or Werribees, right? They're more kind of, sorry, not Werribee, but Broadmeadows. Werribee is actually not a bad area anymore, but comparatively, compared, say, to Melton. But decent suburbs in Perth are still yielding 5 to 5.5% off the bat if you're getting the right deal, right? And like I said, rents are still climbing. The rental demand is still there. That's where I would be for now. Coming back to what I said about Melbourne, we're in this stagnant period at the moment. I don't think you're missing out by not buying there right now because the stagnation doesn't seem to be improving dramatically. So you're not like, it's now or never kind of a thing.
What do you think about certain areas like Frankston, though, that seem to be like, there's pockets of Melbourne that seem to be going like at a totally different beat to the rest of the state?
Yeah.
Well, not the state, the city, the town, like the area.
I think it is driven by a lot of that emotional buying that I was talking about before.
Bit of FOMO, you reckon?
A lot of FOMO, and also people chasing, like Frankston, for example, is surrounded by some very, very expensive, very premium suburbs, especially along the beach, along the coast.
Yeah, drive 10 minutes down the road, you spend 12 mil on a house.
Yeah, 100%. The investors that I speak to, a lot of them aren't interested in growing a large portfolio. They just want a house that they feel good about, or they want to put their money into a property that would otherwise be hammered by inflation. I don't believe the people that are buying in Frankston are the ones that are looking to build 10, 15, 20 properties and get that kind of passive income at the end of the day. I think it's more of a emotional thing that's driving that kind of market, and I do believe in Melbourne, the areas that are going to grow the most are still going to be the Broadies, the Meltons and all those kinds of pockets and the Werribees and even parts of Geelong now.
Talk to me about Geelong. Geelong is something that we don't speak about as much on the show, but I'm hearing more and more people talk about it sort of just off air in chats.
Well, Geelong has always been seen as a satellite city, not satellite, but I should say like a regional city compared to Melbourne. But I think as the urban sprawl happens, it's
kind of joining up.
Growth, it's joining. It's already joined, really. I mean, tons of people that live in Geelong commute to Melbourne, for work and this and that anyway. Again, based on the fact that it's near the water. Got a lot of sort of lifestyle amenities around there, and at the price point that you can still buy houses in certain pockets of Geelong. I think eventually it's going to be pretty sought after location by young families, by average income earners, and it already kind of is. The outskirts of Geelong, a lot of it's being sort of redeveloped, a lot of new houses going in. All the people buying those houses are average, professionals, families.
All right, so obviously buying under market is a massive part of your strategy. It's how you've grown your own portfolio. Where in Melbourne now are you finding like proper the best under market deals?
It's a bit of a trade secret.
Well, it doesn't have to be.
I don't know if I should be telling this. Because we are buying very actively in Melbourne at the moment, and we are getting some really kick-ass deals.
What about one? Just one?
Werribee. Okay. I think everyone knows where Werribee is in terms of Melbourne. That may give you a hint on the type of areas that we're targeting as well. We target multiple areas all around Melbourne, but the Werribees of the Melbourne is where we tend to buy these deals.
And why is Werribee like so sort of primed for this at the moment?
Consistently, these are the kinds of areas that grow the most when the market picks up. For a couple of reasons. Number one, Werribee is still considered, like, it's not low socio, but I would say a more sort of working class-ish kind of an area.
Just blue collar, not below the blue collar.
Yeah, more sort of blue collar kind of area. And eventually these are the kinds of areas that become middle class, right? They become more desirable. And that'll be a product of a lot of the pockets that are, let's say now $800,000 for a house, which there are tons of in Melbourne. As soon as those creep up just 100 grand, it becomes unaffordable to a lot of people, right? Because at around 800-900 is where the max affordability, or even around $1 million is the max affordability for a lot of average income earners, right? And you have to be like slightly above average income to be able to get into that kind of property to live in. However, an example, a property we bought very recently, like within the last month or so. I can't tell you the address, but it's a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-garage. The house is less than 10 years old.
And this is in Werribee?
In Werribee. All the valuations and comparable sales, I mean, anyone can go online and check now. They're all selling for about $650. but we picked it up for 555. That's the level. That's the kind of deals. And this isn't an old house. It didn't need renos. It was just a completely normal house.
And is this like a distressed sale? Is it off market?
It was an off market sale. We only do off markets, but it's an off market sale. Just off the top of my head, I don't remember the situation.
Yep.
But it would have been some situation for them to sell it for that kind of price.
Yeah. That we need to go quick kind of thing.
Yeah. That kind of thing. So yeah, they exist. And think about it like this, like 550 for a 4-bedroom house in a major capital city,
it's nuts.
For a brand new house.
You're not building it for that.
Well, a lot of people are saying that one of the things we hear a lot about areas like Werribee is like there's all these new land releases and they're building more. But what's the cost of building a 4-bedroom house nowadays? It would be around about that kind of price, 550, maybe 600 or more if you had some nice inclusions, right? You're paying, the cost of the build for this property only. The land and everything, I guess you can say, is for free. Because in 10 or 20 years' time, whether the house was built today or 5 or 10 years ago, will be almost indistinguishable.
If I'm understanding you right, this is kind of what I'm picking up. Don't not buy in Melbourne. This isn't anti-Melbourne. But if you go to buy in Melbourne, make sure that you've got a portfolio or a job, like an income, that can actually hold more than just what you're about to buy. You have to make sure that you can keep going.
Yep.
If you're going to be buying in Melbourne, if you can get something that is under market value in an area, like you're saying, like Werribee for this context, somewhere that's got that gentrification set for it, that's already maybe a decent area, but it's looking like it's potentially going to go to a better area in the next kind of 5-10 years. You're buying some instant equity, which means your yield is then going to be better off the bat as well.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to go again quicker.
Yeah.
You're not getting yourself stuck, and you're exposing yourself to a market that has that potential for uplift, but maybe matching it with something in another location that has a bit of a better yield to it already.
Yes. Yeah. Except maybe for the last bit, I know I said previously, buy a couple in Perth, buy a couple of in Melbourne to balance it out. But it's more like it's a tightrope in terms of like, you're here, your passive income goals is here, right? There's two sort of trees and you're walking along this tightrope to get to the other side and you're holding this stick to balance yourself, right? And then on one end of the stick, you got cash flow. On the other end of the stick, you got equity. So you're kind of just walking along this tightrope. Maybe you're dipping into a little bit more cash flow or less cash flow at some point in time and then more into the equity side. And you're kind of doing that, but not just with equity and cash flow, but maybe in different locations as well. Sometimes if buying in a particular city makes more sense at that particular point in time where your portfolio is at, and if it enables you to buy more properties down the track, don't have the emotion of going, I must buy Melbourne because of all the hype and the allure and all that kind of stuff that you're hearing about. You're going to kill your portfolio. As I think the title of this thing is talking about. I'm really lost at the moment, to be honest. I don't know where I am. I just wandered in off the streets and then Todd's like, do you want to record a podcast? I'm like, sure, why not? What do you know about Melbourne? Oh, no, it's a city, I guess.
So for you, it's coming back to balance. This is really what it is. And if you're not careful, you're going to be unbalanced, and you're going to have that. Do they call it a stick? I don't know anything about tightrope walking. Let's go with stick. Your stick is just going to be going way too far in the other direction if you just load yourself up with all of this growth potential. Yeah. And if growth potential is all you're focused on, that's it. You're done.
And guess what? You fall off. Using the same analogy, fall off the tightrope, and then you can't get back on.
I don't mind that. You used that before, or is this just inspiration?
I have used it before, to be fair. Like it's something that I've talked about ad nauseum, but I don't know if people actually listen to me really. I just ramble on sometimes.
I think a couple of people listen to you on this show.
You reckon?
Yeah,
okay,
just
cool.
a few.
Melbourne has a time and a place. I think some things are going for it right now in terms of timing. Right, it's very clear we're getting good deals like Werribee. It's very clear that it would be unlikely for Melbourne to go even further down. Right, especially given the population growth and the pressures along with it, and the economic growth as well, unless there was yet another artificial thing that the government puts in place, maybe even more land tax, who knows, right? Highly unlikely, but now is, in my view, clearly as low as it can go, and the only way is up. But for it to start going up, you need a lot of these things that are out of your control to be amended or fixed or whatever the case is, which is a huge risk factor. Cash flow being such a big problem, if you're going to buy Melbourne property, like as in if you want to maybe take a stab at the market and take a gamble that it will grow in the next year or two or whatever, don't load up fully. You know, you can buy one, buy two, deal with a negative cash flow, and then focus on the other areas that will help balance that as well.
I want to start wrapping this up, but I want to start talking to you about vacancy rates.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the things in Melbourne at the moment.
Yeah.
Like this housing crisis, I don't know where that went in Melbourne, but
It's dropped off the map.
mate, when we were renting
Everyone's
our
moved
place
to
out,
Perth.
we were renting our place out. We had like 3 applications over a few weeks. Like it's rented, it's done.
Yeah.
Obviously the yield's low. We're expecting that. But in comparison to when we're renting like one of our Queensland properties, our Adelaide properties, is like they're chewing their arm off. Like it's what are your thoughts on people preparing for this and going like as essentially just have a bigger savings buffer ready for it?
Yeah, you know, always have a buffer. Look, I think the rental market at the moment in Melbourne is the byproduct of the exodus of investors that sold off over the years due to the land tax, and the renters that used to rent those properties are maybe moving to different parts of Australia because maybe they're over it as well. Because, you know, you're basically swapping from one rental property to another rental property to another rental property, and the same thing's happening over and over again.
Sick of it.
They're sick of it. And then, however, all these investors interstate are going, oh, you know what, there's an opportunity here because all these people are selling up. But they're all also investors. So they have the same problem of trying to find the same tenants to rent their properties, especially in areas that have traditionally been very renter skewed, you know, in terms of owner occupier versus renters in the area. So I think it's a temporary issue. You know, the population growth thing is real. And at the end of the day, all these people need a house to live in, right? And not everyone can go off and buy a house. So I think given a bit of time, I think the rental demand problem will be improved a lot more sooner than we're going to see tons and tons of growth in the prices.
So you reckon rents are going to go up in a bigger way?
I think rents will go up first.
Yep.
The yields will improve, and then time will tell with regards to significant growth.
Because I feel like it's one of the only places, like capital city left in the country, where you can actually rent a place like in the 300s.
Because the market's not going anywhere anytime, well, currently anyway, a lot of these areas that have $300 per week properties, I'd say not everyone would want those to live in, right? Because if you're renting in an area at $300 or $400 a week and the area is improving rapidly, it's a slightly different dynamic than just go, oh yeah, I want to live in, you know, one of the worst parts of Melbourne with no sort of improvement in sight, if that makes sense.
Talk to me about townhouses then.
Look, I think it would be budget dependent, right? If you have a lower budget, don't be afraid to go for townhouses or villas because they will take off as well if the houses do go up. You know, eventually it'll be the turn of the townhouses and villas. But crucially, townhouses and villas currently offer slightly better cash flow as well. So the holdability factor and the serviceability will definitely be improved if you buy those kinds of assets.
And are you seeing a little bit of history potentially repeating itself as well, in the sense of like houses, townhouses, units? Like it's usually the houses that go first. Yeah,
100%. Like I think we did an episode previously where I used Brisbane as an example. You know, it's 2017 to 2021 was when houses just took off, right? And townhouses and villas did very little. But then between 2021 and 2025, the townhouses and villas have more or less doubled in value, actually more than doubled in value, especially in areas like Moreton Bay and Ipswich and Logans and so on. It will grow eventually, maybe a slightly longer wait, but if it means that you can load up more now sustainably, keyword being sustainably, then I don't see any issues with that, as long as you're patient.
I feel like your tightrope analogy is the perfect one for this because, again, like you're saying at the start, this isn't anti-Melbourne. This is anti-getting stuck.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can get themselves stuck just getting into the YOLO, or not YOLO, what's it called? FOMO. I think YOLO is a different one. Caught up in the
Similar.
FOMO. Yeah.
If you have FOMO, you probably have YOLO. It's kind of like diseases. They go hand in hand.
But if you are getting something that you're like, oh my God, look at this land component, I'm going to develop it one day. And it's like, yeah, but cool, but it's negative like $500 a week.
Yeah.
Unless you're on an awesome income,
yeah,
you're not really moving ahead after that. Whereas if you can actually pair it, you can get something with a decent yield, you can buy something under market value.
Yeah.
This is when it starts to actually make sense. So Melbourne's a go, but Melbourne's a go in the right way.
Yes, absolutely. You have to be very clear on your goals just know that whatever house you buy in Melbourne at the moment, you're going to be negative cash flow. And it's not like $20 a week, right?
Yeah, it's a bit.
It's quite a bit, right? And then you got to tack on the land tax component. Really think about that deeply before you make any decisions. Think about whether it aligns with your long-term goals. Don't forget that Melbourne is not the only city that makes sense to buy in. I've talked about Perth. I've talked about Adelaide as well in previous episodes. And even though everyone's been saying these two cities have gone rubbish from 1 or even 2 years ago, statistics, data, everyone loves data except for me, but even I will concede that the data that shows these areas have grown a lot. In fact, probably more than the Melbournes, you know, of the world. So yeah, you know, just make the right decisions based on your goals, I think, at the end of the day.
So what's the action step for someone? Someone that's listened to this that was like, yeah, I was just about to buy in Melbourne. Pull out the headphones. They can get straight into it right now, but in a way that's going to actually be conducive to portfolio growth, not killing their portfolio growth.
Man, it just depends on the individual, their income, their personal situation, how many properties they have, whether they're starting out or not, whether they've got assets in other areas. You know, I think all of that comes into play. You know, find a good broker, talk to the broker, find out whether buying that Melbourne house is going to impact your future buying and how it will impact it. And if it does, don't do it. And obviously if that's your goal. But if not, if you're buying because you really love Melbourne or you really believe in the growth and you don't mind the negative cash flow and, you know, you think the new government or whatever's going to come into place is going to do a complete backflip and then it's just going to come roaring back, do it. You know, like there's nothing wrong with that either. But just be very clear on where you want to be, I think.
And really clear on the possible downsides to doing that as well.
Yeah, look, I've always seen it as an opportunity cost, right? Like for me, volume is key. Owning more houses with the right fundamentals always has made me a lot more money than trying to pick the absolute best of, you know, and most of that you get it wrong anyway, right? I've always said multiple times, I wish I bought every single house in Mount Druitt back in 2010, 2009, but I didn't because it felt obviously not the right thing to do.
How much flack did you cop though for buying constantly in Logan? You would have all the time.
It was the same thing. Yeah. It was exactly the same thing. Like at the time, Logan was the Mount Druitt equivalent, right? And arguably some parts are still are. And I remember going to these property meetups and, you know, back then when there were still quite a few of them around and, you know, some of the more experienced investors were like, oh, you know, you don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. You're buying all these houses there and it's not going to grow. It's never going to improve, but it has. You know, so what can I say? I got it right.
Proofs in the pudding.
Yeah, 100%. But look, I'm not saying that it repeats itself, but it's a pretty consistent pattern that you can see. You know, it's always the sort of up and coming stuff. And even now, like, you know, especially anyone who lives in Melbourne, it's a very difficult pill to swallow to buy in Meltons, to buy in the Broadmeadows, you know, to look at parts of Geelong even. You know, because they've grown up always with that stigma that these areas are completely no-go zones.
I always look at it the same though. You go to anywhere, like a global city. You go to New York.
Yeah.
In Manhattan. I bet you 10 years ago, everyone would have been like, Brooklyn? Do you want to get shot?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Now, Brooklyn's lovely. You get a brownstone in Brooklyn, you're talking about millions of dollars.
It's not even lovely. It's like, it's more desirable.
But this is my point though as well. Like the gentrification side of things. It's like what might not be nice now is going to be nice eventually.
Yeah.
But obviously this doesn't apply across the board with everything at all times, and they're going to shift at different times. But I'm pretty sure the highest growing area in all of Australia over the past 30 years was, I'm pretty sure it was actually Yarraville. And it's one of the best gentrifiers, close to the city. But 30 years ago, it would have been like, oh God, is that where you live?
Yeah.
Like it's changing. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, every city has that story. In Sydney, it would be a lot of the inner west.
Redfern.
Marrickvilles, you know, those kinds of areas. So anyway, yeah, there are a lot of these areas that will change over time.
All right. Well, Simon, I've asked you once before. Actually, I've asked you a couple of times, mate. But I need to ask you again. Simon Loo, what is your favourite pizza?
Whatever my wife buys. I just eat anything with meat on it.
Anything with meat on it that my wife
pepperoni.
buys.
Just give me a pepperoni. But I'll do pepperoni and burrata. Give me that. I'm happy.
Pepperoni and what?
Burrata.
What's burrata?
It's a type of cheese.
Oh.
You live in Adelaide, you don't know what burrata is?
I don't know what burrata is.
You guys only eat burrata in Adelaide.
I'm going to Google burrata as soon as we finish this recording. Now, look, as far as wrapping this one up, Melbourne's a go, but Melbourne's a go with caution. Melbourne's a go with if you can get into an area that you can buy under market value, if you can get into an area that's got maybe a little bit of a better yield because it's going to be the best of a bad bunch because you're not going to get a great yield in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But also making sure that you're not putting so much on one side of the stick. I'm just going to keep with the stick analogy on your tightrope that you're just falling off and you're stalling yourself.
Yeah.
You need to have that balance.
Yeah, and it's not just about picking the area and getting below market. Like you do that everywhere. Just make sure you know the risks, and also make sure you know how it's going to impact you in the future if you were to buy any property in Melbourne, right? So if the risks are not conducive to your goals, don't do it. But if they are, or if they're not going to impact it so much, I think it is worth. I don't want to use the word gamble, but I think it is worth investing because, like I said before, the upside to Melbourne is that I think the only way is up. So it's just going to be a matter of time as to when that's going to happen.
No, I reckon that's a perfect way to end it. Simon Loo from House Finder, thank you so much for jumping on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.